Hello everyone and welcome to today's video. In today's video, I'm taking a very early look at the 2026 US Senate map, and I'm looking at four races in particular that I think are going to be some of the closest in the entire country for 2026 and potentially could lead to which party controls the US Senate in 2026. Now, to be upfront and direct with you, based on how the Republicans did in the 2024 Senate elections, they put themselves in a very good place. The Republicans currently control 53 Senate seats, Democrats have 47 after the 2024 elections, in which the Republicans flipped 4 Senate seats. Now, we knew we're all but certain Republicans were going to flip the state of West Virginia after Senator Joe Manchin retired. We also knew it was looking pretty good. Montana was going to flip to Republican Tim Sheehy against Democratic incumbent John Tester, given that it is a very Republican state at the presidential level, and Tester would be in a very tough position for re-election. Once you get down to Ohio, this is where some predictors and pundits start to get a little more divided. In my Senate prediction, I did predict Republican Bernie Moreno would defeat Democratic incumbent Senator Sherrod Brown, honestly for similar reasons as Montana, where I think it's such a Republican state at the presidential level now, it has down ballot effects, where the Republican candidates won't do as good as Donald Trump, but will be good enough to win the race, which is exactly what happened. But the surprise to, I think, everybody was Dave McCormick being able to defeat Democratic incumbent Senator Bob Casey in the state of Pennsylvania. And Bob Casey won here, Dave McCormick beat Bob Casey here by just 0.2%. And this is why this win by McCormick over Casey of about 15,000 votes or so is absolutely so crucial. When you look at the 2026 Senate map, right now I have Republicans favored in about 51 Senate seats. Democrats favored in about 45, with 4 remaining toss-up states. Hypothetically, if Bob Casey had won the Pennsylvania Senate race in 2024, this would put Republicans at 50 and Democrats at 46, meaning there is a path where the Democrats could get to 50 Senate seats and essentially had a tie Senate, which means if any Republicans did not vote for the same bill as all the other Republicans, then there would essentially not be a path to getting that bill signed. So Dave McCormick winning that Pennsylvania Senate seat was very crucial for 2026. But that doesn't mean 2026 is over. This is certainly one of the more favorable maps there is for the Republicans of the 3 Senate map contingents. I would go far as even saying that of all the Senate maps, this one is probably the most favorable to the Republicans now, seeing as there is a Democratic senator in Georgia and in Michigan, 2 states Donald Trump did just win in 2024, both battleground states, but Trump did win there. There's also right now a Republican senator in the state of Maine, the only Republican representing a state that voting for Kamala Harris in the Senate elections. So the 2026 map has these 4 races that are very, very close that I do want to talk about a little bit. And for the Democrats to flip the Senate in 2026, it really involves the Democrats getting very lucky and putting a Senate race like Ohio or Iowa or Texas or Montana or Alaska in play. Because I think every other Senate race is going to be listed as safe Republican, including the state of Florida for whichever senator replaces Marco Rubio. And I know Democrats have talked about Ohio with certain candidates like Sherrod Brown or Tim Ryan making the race competitive. I have no doubt they'll make the race more competitive, but I seriously doubt a Democrat's going to be able to win a Senate race in 2026 in Ohio. Same goes for Iowa and Montana. Texas, again, honestly, the same thing. The most winnable of the likely Republican races for the Democrats may honestly be the state of Alaska if the Democrats run Mary Peltola and she does very well in the Senate race as she did in the House race in 2022. Maybe that could be a possibility, but for right now, I'd put it as likely Republican. But still, these 4 Senate races that I'm going to talk about in this video are the 4 I'm watching for very closely in the Senate elections in 2026. And that's without me going even into some other Senate races, which I think will be very close that I'm keeping an eye on, like the state of New Hampshire. Minnesota and Virginia, I don't think will be as close, nor will Colorado or New Mexico, but New Hampshire is one I'm certainly keeping an eye on as well. First, we're going to go alphabetically. We're going to start with the state of Georgia. So the state of Georgia, this is going to be Senator Jon Ossoff. He'll be facing off against a Republican opponent. Ossoff won back in 2020 in the runoff election against Republican Senator David Perdue, and it's going to be a very contentious primary, most likely, for the Republicans to go up against Jon Ossoff. Right now, the only publicly expressed interest candidate is Buddy Carter, a U.S. representative from Georgia's 1st congressional district, but the one that everyone's watching is Governor of Georgia, Brian Kemp. Brian Kemp is term limited in 2026 and cannot run for re-election. So if he wants to run for an office that he wants to serve in, he can't do governor. Senate would be certainly a possibility, and many people have been reaching out to him, gauging his interest in if this would be something he would do. And the reasons for this is when you look back at the election history. I'll show you both in 2020, Jon Ossoff won this race by 1.2 points over David Perdue. And also Raphael Warnock won by 2.1 points in the special election. In 2022, Warnock won re-election by 2.8%. But when you look back at the governor's elections, in 2022, Brian Kemp won re-election against Stacey Abrams, the same opponent from 2018, by 7.5%. Now we go back to 2018, Kemp won by 1.4% against Stacey Abrams. So Kemp right now has been one of the best performing Republicans in elections in the entire state of Georgia. And when you look at the 2026 Senate race, right now it's pretty clear Brian Kemp gives the Republicans the best chance at winning the state of Georgia. And when you look at the presidential race, where we just saw Donald Trump defeat Kamala Harris by 51% to 49%, it was only a 2-point race. So even if Brian Kemp does run against Jon Ossoff, it is by no means a lock that Kemp is going to win. It's going to be a very, very close race. You have a decently or pretty popular senator going up against a pretty popular governor. It's going to be, first of all, millions of dollars spent in a Georgia Senate race in 2026, and it's going to be very, very close. But of all the potential Republican candidates, Brian Kemp does give the best chance at winning for the Republicans. So Georgia, in its Senate race, which I do have listed to start as a toss-up, is certainly going to be, I think, one of the closest in the entire country between a Democratic incumbent senator, which defeating an incumbent is no easy feat. You can ask Dave McCormick, who just beat Bob Casey. He only did it by 15,000 votes in one of the closest states in the country. It is not easy. So Georgia is certainly one of the Senate races I'm watching very, very close. The next one I'm watching after that is the state of Michigan. Michigan is represented right now by Democratic incumbent Senator Gary Peters. And the reason I'm watching this one is because at the presidential level, we actually did just see Donald Trump win the state of Michigan in 2024 by 1.4%. And at the Senate level, we just saw this race go to the Democrat Lisa Slotkin over Republican Mike Rogers by just 0.3%. Yes, this was an open race, but there's also a Libertarian candidate taking 1% third party. So the Republicans may look at the Michigan Senate race in 2024 and now look towards 2026 in what could be a very, very close race. Now, Wikipedia does not have a page of this one, so it doesn't have the candidates listed as who could run, but you could be looking at some Republicans you may have heard of in Michigan, like Mike Rogers, who just ran for Senate, like John James, who ran against Peters a few years ago, like Tudor Dixon, who ran for governor against Gretchen Whitmer a few years ago. Are any of these Republican candidates capable of defeating Gary Peters? Well, it's tough because Michigan, despite Donald Trump winning it now in 2016 and 2024, doesn't have the strongest bench in terms of down-ballot, well-known Republicans. That doesn't mean a Republican can't kind of rise out of nowhere and win a surprise race, kind of like Dave McCormick did in Pennsylvania, but there isn't already an established Republican challenger that everyone knows statewide that's like begging for them to run in Michigan. So I would say right now Gary Peters would start out as a narrow favorite in Michigan, but the 2024 presidential race certainly gives Republicans optimism that they may be able to take the state of Michigan at the Senate level and have a Republican senator there in Michigan for the first time, I think, in a very long time. I'm not even sure there's been a Republican senator in Michigan, at least in the 2000s. So it'd certainly be bucking a national trend there. So Michigan and Georgia I've gone over are two seats the Democrats currently represent that I think Republicans have really good pickup opportunities in. Now we have two states that are the other two toss-up states I have in the 2026 Senate map, where it's the opposite, where it's the Democrats going on the offensive. And this is going to start with the state of Maine with Republican Senator Susan Collins. Maine is a very fascinating one because this is the only Senate seat now in a state that Kamala Harris won in 2024 with a Republican senator. And Susan Collins, who was first elected back in 1996, she is often regarded as one of those bipartisan Republicans in the Senate, constantly breaking away from her party and voting as a moderate and voting with the Democrats on several bills. So much so that a lot of Republicans have gotten frustrated and even considered primarying her, but they know Maine, given that Maine is going to be at best a likely Democratic state, a primary challenge to get rid of Collins would certainly give this race to a Democrat without a question. So it seems like Susan Collins is going to be the Republican nominee without question. Now there comes, who will the Democrats run to go against her? And there actually is some pretty well-known names on the Democratic side that could challenge Collins. First, as mentioned, is Maine 2nd Congressional District Democrat Jared Golden. He's someone that's being talked about in 2026, potentially running for governor, as Janet Mills, the governor of Maine, is term limited. But he did just narrowly win a very close election. Let me see if I can find the House map, where Golden won after the ranked choice voting system 50.3 to 49.7, only by about 3,000 votes. So a very close race in Maine's 2nd district. Maybe he doesn't want to face another very close election like this one. He thinks his chances of winning the Senate race could be better. That could be a potential scenario. Troy Jackson is the president of the Maine Senate since 2018. He would certainly be at least a formidable opponent against Susan Collins. But the two names that really fascinate me the most are Governor Janet Mills of Maine and Shelley Pingree, U.S. Representative from Maine's 1st Congressional District. Shelley Pingree is kind of on par with Jared Golden in terms of being a representative from Maine in Congress, but she's from the more Democratic of the two districts in Maine. So she has more of a Democratic proven track record, which could actually, going up against a moderate like Susan Collins, be potentially a good thing if the voters in Maine want a more Democratic senator than Collins. Jared Golden's also been voted one of the most bipartisan members of Congress, so Collins versus Golden would kind of be like two moderates going at it. I'm not really sure if voters in Maine would want to go that way. Maybe they will, but Shelley Pingree offers a real contrast between a moderate Republican and a strong Democrat vote. Janet Mills, the governor of Maine, though, is what fascinates me because she's won both her governor's races when she's been up for re-election, but due to Maine state law, she's not allowed to run for a third term as governor, similar to Brian Kemp in Georgia. So Janet Mills, I think, is someone that could potentially be a very formidable opponent to Susan Collins because, yes, Golden has won his district, Pingree has won her district, Mills has won the state of governor, she's won the whole state, and she's done it twice now. She would be someone I think could be actually a very formidable challenge to Susan Collins, where when you look back at the governor's races in 2022, Mills won by 13.2% statewide against Paul LePage, who was the Republican governor of Maine not too long ago. Go back to 2018, Mills defeated the Republican candidate Moody by 7.7%. Back in 2014, Paul LePage won by 4.8 points. So Mills, at least in 2022, won the state by a likely margin, coming close to a safe margin. Mills, at very least, is a very formidable name. And whether you're a Democrat or a Republican in Maine, you have to be keeping an eye on her as potentially running for this race. There's been no indication that she will, but she would be a very formidable opponent to go up against Susan Collins if she did. Right now, I think the race starts out in my own rankings as lean for Susan Collins. I think she'd probably win by under 5%, but more than 1%. If Janet Mills were to run, this race could get very, very close very quickly. So those are three Senate races that are very close in 2026 that I'm watching. The last one is North Carolina. And this is one I did a few days ago in another video that I encourage you to check out, where I gave some more in-depth thought on this one. But North Carolina, this is two-term Republican incumbent Tom Tillis. This one's very fascinating because Tillis is going to be facing likely two opportunities or two threats in this race. One from a Republican primary challenge from the right, from the more MAGA side of the party, and another is from a strong Democratic candidate. Tillis has often been critical of President-elect Donald Trump and often voting against a lot of some of his proposals in the Senate. And that has made a lot of Republicans, including Republicans in North Carolina, very frustrated, and there have been some Republicans saying they want to challenge him. Outgoing Lieutenant Governor Mark Robinson, who just lost by a big margin for the governor's race, has considered a potential primary challenge to Tom Tillis, but he has pretty much said he's not going to run against him. But there is someone that could potentially run against him if that is something they pursue. But even if Tillis, let's say, holds on and wins a Republican primary, he's still likely going to be facing either outgoing U.S. Representative Willie Nickel or outgoing Governor of North Carolina Roy Cooper, who, like Kemp before him, is going to be term limited, but this time in 2024. So Cooper is going to be out of office in about a month, which means he can pretty much just spend every minute of his day running for this race against Tom Tillis if he chooses to. And Roy Cooper is a very fascinating one because, at least from the approval ratings that I've seen, Cooper has a strong approval rating in North Carolina. And we did see in 2020 Roy Cooper win the race against Republican Dan Forest by 4.5%, and back in 2016, Cooper won by 0.22%. So, and this was against a Republican incumbent, Pat McCrory, defeating him. So Cooper has won now 2 very close races on the same ballot as Donald Trump. Both times where Trump won the state, Cooper has won, and he won by almost a likely margin in 2020. Am I saying if the race is Cooper versus Tillis, that Tillis is automatically going to lose? No. But does Cooper versus Tillis give the Democrats the best chance at winning North Carolina and the Senate or presidential level in a very long time? Yes. I think at the presidential level, I don't really see North Carolina going to the Democrats anytime soon, to be truthful. The last time the Democrats represented a Senate or the last time there was a Democrat in the Senate was 2014 with the late Senator Kay Hagan. Roy Cooper presents the Democrats the best opportunity at winning the state of North Carolina. And if Thom Tillis's approval ratings with the members of his Republican Party does not get any better, then a situation of North Carolina going for under 1% for Roy Cooper, I think is certainly possible. One thing that's been interesting, though, is every election Thom Tillis has been in that he has won, at some point he's been considered the underdog in that race. Very briefly, towards the end of the 2020 election, where things kind of broke his way after a scandal in the Democrat, Tillis pulled ahead. But in 2014, he was also not really favored to defeat the Democratic candidate either. So this wouldn't be the first time people have underestimated Thom Tillis, but I promise you, if it is Tillis versus Roy Cooper, this is going to be one of the closest and most expensive Senate races in the history of the United States. So that's certainly going to be one I'm watching very closely. So Republicans start out with about 51, Democrats 45, and these 4 Senate races I'm watching very closely, as they could have great lasting effects for how the Senate looks both in 2026 and going into the 2028 elections, where depending on how the Democrats do, if the Democrats win every single one of these races, and that puts them up to 49, that could present a scenario where the Democrats could flip the Senate in 2028. Whereas if the Republicans win out in Michigan, Maine, North Carolina, and Georgia, that would put the Democrats' chances of winning 2028 basically impossible. So there's huge ramifications for these 4 races. That will do it for today's video. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please remember to give it a like. And if you really liked it, please remember to click the subscribe button. And make sure you turn post notifications on so you always get notified when I post a new video. That way you never miss one. Also, please remember to share this video with your friends and family if you really like the video. And remember to stay tuned, because I'll be posting at least one video every single day leading up until Election Day. So I'd really appreciate it if you keep coming back and watching those videos. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in a future video.